Please stand by. You will now be placed into conference.
Hearing from Josh Leisen, who is a Watershed project manager with the nonprofit organization known as Huron Pines. Josh works out of Gaylord, Michigan, and he tells me that it's actually starting to look like fall up there today, so that's great. I told him that today's like the first day down here in Mississippi where it's been under 90 degrees in about 3 months, so it's quite nice here. Josh has a master's in geography where he focused on landscape connectivity. He's been with Huron Pines now since about 2013, where he started as a watershed technician through the AmeriCorps program. Project prioritization is an important element of his job, and he has been with the staff and in the lead for developing and managing and prioritizing projects. And he has a prioritization tool that's known as the Huron Pines Megalist. So this Megalist is the actual topic of today's presentation. So with that, I think we'll turn it on over to Josh. Take her away, Josh.
Okay, thank you for the introduction and also for the opportunity to present today. Again, my name is Josh Leisen, and I'll be talking about the Huron Pines Megalist. I'll be introducing you to this tool and also the process that Huron Pines uses to prioritize both our on-the-ground restoration projects as well as community engagement efforts. And although I'll be speaking from the standpoint of Huron Pines, I do believe that the Megalist tool and the examples of project prioritization I will cover today can be adapted to fit a lot of different project types, and I think it'll be of interest to a wide audience. So I hope that the presentation today at least inspires some careful thought the next time you find yourselves tasked with project prioritization. So I'll start by providing a brief overview of Huron Pines and our major programs before delving into the details of the Megalist. I'll illustrate our prioritization process using some examples of road stream crossing projects in a hypothetical watershed, and then I'll call attention to some existing inventory protocols and related online resources. And finally, I'll touch on the importance of engaging stakeholders in the project prioritization process before concluding with a summary. And of course, there will be time for questions at the end. So Huron Pines is a 501c3 conservation organization, and our mission is to protect the Great Lakes by conserving the forest lakes and streams of northeast Michigan. We're located in Gaylord, Michigan, and our 12-county service area extends along the Lake Huron shoreline from the Mackinac Bridge down to Saginaw Bay, and then inland to cover the Sheboygan, Thunder Bay, Ausable, and northern Saginaw Bay watersheds, as well as the headwaters of some of the watersheds that drain west into Lake Michigan. And we currently have a staff of 10 full-time employees with backgrounds in geography, ecology, education, environmental policy, and accounting. And we also have a couple of seasonal field crew, and we host several full-time AmeriCorps members every year. Huron Pines has defined 3 major roles and goals that help us achieve our mission: coordinating high-impact on-the-ground restoration projects, providing leadership to partners, and fostering collaboration between the private and public sectors, and integrating a conservation ethic into all aspects of our communities. And our major programs are kind of organized into water, wildlife, and community themes, but of course there's always some overlap. For example, a major dam removal project connects aquatic habitat and restores natural river functions, but there's often invasive species management component as the former impoundment area becomes revegetated. And likewise, with any large-scale restoration projects, there's usually a significant human element and a lot of stakeholder engagement that goes into successfully completing those types of projects. So some example project types that we in our water program would be dam removals, road stream crossing improvements, stormwater management, stream bank stabilization projects, and installing in-stream habitat for fish cover. And the goals of our water program include protecting clean water, reconnecting aquatic habitat, and enhancing habitat for aquatic wildlife. Our wildlife program focuses on protecting and improving wetland and upland habitat. And Huron Pines serves as the lead organization for the Northeast Michigan Cooperative Weed Management Area, or CWMA. And our wildlife projects include agricultural stewardship, invasive species management, forest management, wetland restoration, and others. And those projects are often done with a cost share with participating landowners. And then our community program, we feel strongly that protection of our natural resources depends on vibrant communities and a public that cares about our resources. And natural resource agencies and conservation groups can do a lot of work, but really the long-term sustainability of resources depends on the values that are held by individual landowners, local businesses, resource users, decision makers, and community members. And that's why Huron Pines engages in efforts to strengthen local communities. One example is our Huron Pines AmeriCorps program. We place about 30 members per year with conservation organizations all over Michigan, and that helps organizations build capacity to raise public awareness about resource issues and engage with landowners, student groups, and other stakeholders. So, returning to the topic of this presentation, the Huron Pines Megalist, what is it? It's basically just a database of potential projects that have been identified as regional priorities. And this screenshot you're looking at here shows a portion of the Huron Pines Megalist, which we keep in a Microsoft Excel file format. And the idea behind the Megalist is, and our prioritization process in general, is to ensure that limited resources are used effectively to maximize ecological and socioeconomic benefits of restoration work. The Megalist includes sites determined as priorities based on objective, science-based analysis of comprehensive inventory data that's been collected in the field. And it's meant to be a flexible tool that can be adapted to incorporate different types of projects and scaled to different geographies, whether that's a watershed, an organization service area, or political unit. The Megalist is also an excellent tool for communicating with project partners and potential funders. And it's a place that you can track completed projects along with comments and lessons learned about projects that have been done. So going into a little detail about how it's formatted, returning to the screenshot, I'll walk through some of the data that's captured in the Megalist. And if you notice in the bottom left, we have it divided into tabs that meet our organizational themes of water, wildlife, community. And the column headers on each of those tabs are a little different to reflect the nature of those different types of projects. From left to right across the top, we have site ID information, specific location information about the site, a narrative of problems observed at the site, as well as potential restoration deliverables, including upstream miles reconnected and estimated annual sediment loads for fish passage sites. And then an area to place comments about project costs, partners, funding sources, and other special considerations. So water projects like dams and road stream crossings have discrete locations with associated GPS coordinates. Our wildlife projects, on the other hand, are usually different in nature. With wildlife projects, it's not necessarily an individual project that is the priority, but rather these projects are often driven by cumulative goals or more qualitative goals. Therefore, we use different column headings in the wildlife tab of our Megalist. For example, one of our goals is to prevent invasive Phragmites from spreading north along the Lake Huron shoreline from Saginaw Bay, where it's currently very prevalent. And so any patch of Phragmites that shows up along the northern Lake Huron shoreline, therefore, becomes a priority for early detection rapid response treatment. Likewise, partners may set a goal of reducing inputs of sediment to a watershed by, say, 10%. Reaching that goal may entail any combination of agricultural stewardship, stream bank stabilization, or stormwater management projects that achieve that goal, but any individual property or site might not stand out as a regional priority on its own. And that isn't to say that site prioritization is not worthwhile for these types of projects. We certainly look at cost-benefit ratio with any stewardship project that we take on. And we always engage our stakeholders and review existing plans and strategies in order to maximize benefits. The map at left, for example, highlights biologically significant areas defined by the state of Michigan, as well as valuable wildlife corridors defined through our own analysis, GIS analysis of different land cover and biological considerations. So when possible, we seek to align our forest management and other private land stewardship projects with these areas. Community projects tend to be more qualitative and more subjective than water or wildlife projects, but we still seek to identify the most meaningful projects that will yield the highest positive impact for communities and healthy natural resources. So we rely heavily on stakeholders to help us define high-priority community engagement efforts, and the community tab of the Megalist includes fields like audience, project purpose, a statement of needs, obstacles, recommendations, potential partnerships, and funding opportunities. And this diagram basically summarizes a process that we use for identifying and analyzing potential community engagement type projects. It starts with identifying community needs and deciding whether or not they align with our mission and our strategic vision. If it's a good fit for us organizationally, the next step is to identify obstacles, meet with stakeholders to develop strategies for addressing those needs, and then moving forward with fundraising and implementation with a sound plan in place. So let's switch gears for a moment, and I want to touch on the importance of project prioritization in the quality assurance process and walk through prioritization of road stream crossings as a hypothetical example. So let's suppose we're interested in the watershed shown here and that our primary focus is to improve aquatic organism passage. Assume that you get a phone call from the road commission and they want help fixing a crossing that's in pretty rough shape. So you go out to the field, you conduct a site visit, you observe that the culvert is severely undersized and its outlet is perched above the downstream water level. There's no way that fish can pass upstream, and erosion at the site looks pretty bad. So assume that you're able to move forward and secure funding to replace the culvert with an adequately sized and aligned structure. The project goes smoothly, and it looks great when it's finished. You've conducted your pre- and post-macro invertebrate sampling, longitudinal profiles, and stream cross-sections, and the results show exactly what you hoped for. The new structure was installed just as designed, and it's doing its job. However, you get calls from landowners that live upstream on the tributaries, and they complain that they're still not seeing trout or salmon spawning where they historically used to spawn. So why not? You've invested a lot of time and money and hard work into the project. So this time, let's assume you completed a comprehensive inventory of all the road stream crossings and known dams throughout the watershed. Now you have a big picture view that allows for improved decision making, which in turn helps save time, money, and other resources. In this case, you can see that the road stream crossing from the previous slide failed to meet its aquatic organism passage goal because there are several dams upstream from it that are acting as fish passage barriers. So with the inventory data, you have a science-based method for developing a list of priority sites. You can select the sites that are an issue from an aquatic organism passage standpoint, that is, those that are perched or velocity barriers. Then you can list those sites in order of potential restoration deliverables, in this case by upstream miles reconnected. You may also want to exclude sites that fail to reach a certain threshold for that deliverable. For example, only include sites where the upstream miles reconnected would exceed a half a mile. In the comment section, you might also note pairs or groups of sites that should be completed in tandem, such as potential project number 1 as shown on the map. Depending on secondary goals, you may choose to include additional sites that have exceptionally high sediment loads, where there are human safety issues or other factors that you consider important. So looking at the full inventory data, I've identified 3 potential projects that rank as high priorities based on the habitat connectivity goal. Project 1 would include the restoration of the road stream crossing and the dam just upstream from it on the main stem river. Project 2 would restore a single road stream crossing located on the downstream end of a significant tributary. And Project 3 would involve removal of the first barrier, which is a large dam on the lower main stem river. And let's assume that this watershed drains directly into one of the Great Lakes. So at this stage, you'd have 3 potential projects that you could enter into your project megalist. These 3 potential projects were prioritized using an objective system of ranking sites based on the full inventory data and GIS analysis of potential upstream miles reconnected. Again, these essentially represent the groups of project sites that would make their way onto our project megalist. But I really want to emphasize caution at this stage. It's extremely important to seek feedback from stakeholders in order to really dig deep into the pros and cons of taking on any particular project. The objective ranking system provides excellent justification for prioritizing sites, but it's only one step in the larger process of project prioritization. The inventory data fails to capture the full ecological and socioeconomic context of potential project sites. Suppose that removing the first barrier, Project 3, allows invasive sea lampreys to enter the watershed. Or suppose that you take on Project 2, achieving the most upstream miles reconnected for the best price, but the habitat upstream from that crossing is marginal at best. Or suppose you take on Project 1, you bundle the crossing and the dam together, you secure funding for implementation, and then only to find out that the landowner that owns the property surrounding the dam absolutely will not grant permission to access the property and remove the dam. But assuming that habitat quality is constant throughout the watershed and that you do have the permissions that you need, maybe you go ahead with Project 2. Maybe it's a road infrastructure priority anyway and you have a favorable cost-benefit ratio. Alternatively, if the funding scenario is favorable, you might want to take on Project number 1. And pulling together local resource professionals, county road commissions, and landowners is an essential step of the process for wise project prioritization. I recommend involving stakeholders early and often to build consensus around shared goals and to identify potential issues early on. So this graphic summarizes our prioritization process for road stream crossings. Huron Pines starts by completing a comprehensive inventory of every site within the watershed. That inventory data is then entered into a database, and we flag problematic sites. Those that are perched act as velocity barriers or are contributing significant sediment via road runoff or erosion associated with the crossing. So severe sites are then included on the Megalist. We then refine that list of sites based on the spatial, ecological, and socioeconomic context of the project site. We ask questions like, how many upstream miles will be reconnected? Are there other fish passage barriers adjacent to the site? What is the quality of habitat that would be reconnected? Are there any threatened or endangered species in the stream? Or are there invasive species concerns related with the project? Is the landowner willing to authorize the project? How much will it cost? And is funding available? Are there human safety or road maintenance issues at this site? Or how does the project have does the project have general support from partners and from the public? And once these questions are answered, you can move forward with more confidence that your project is a good one. Then it's time to seek funding, develop partnership agreements, complete design and permitting, implement the project, conduct your evaluation, and share your results back to the community, your partners, and funders. And while we're on the topic of road stream crossings, I do want to point out that there is a standardized protocol and data sheet for collecting road stream crossing inventory data in the Great Lakes region. And you can find the protocol and data sheet online by Googling Great Lakes Road Stream Crossing Inventory Protocol. You're looking at the data sheet now, which includes information collected about location of the site, the dimensions and condition of existing crossing structure, water depth and water velocity, as well as substrate type and amount at the inlet and outlet, the dimensions of the plunge pool and upstream ponding when applicable, and information collected at a reference riffle that's used for comparison. This form also includes space to include characteristics of the roadway and to quantitatively describe any erosion sites. And as a part of the inventory process, a standard set of photographs and a site sketch are also taken. And all of the inventory data that Huron Pines collects is made publicly available on a website, northernmichiganstreams.org. And you're looking at a screenshot of that inventory data for the Asable River watershed. There were 832 inventoried crossings, and they're color-coded by severity. And you can click any of them to view the photographs, an interactive map, and all of the information from that data sheet that was on the previous slide. NorthernMichiganStreams.org also houses stream bank erosion inventory data and dams inventory data. Between Huron Pines Conservation Resource Alliance and Tip of the Mitt Watershed Council, road stream crossing inventories have been completed for most of northern lower Michigan since 2011 using the Great Lakes Road Stream Crossing Inventory Protocol. Huron Pines has secured funding to inventory the Thunder Bay watershed in 2017 and 2018, and that pretty much completes our inventory coverage of the Huron Pines service area. Again, all of this data can be viewed online at northernmichiganstreams.org. For those of you that work with invasive species, I advise checking out the Midwest Invasive Species Information Network. This is an interactive online tool that allows users to report invasive species sightings and also to browse existing reports by date, species, or geography. And that website is misen.msu.edu. And as you zoom in on the MISSN website, the view changes to satellite imagery, and you can click on any of the reports to see the full details of that report. And very recently, MISSN has developed a tool that practitioners can use to track treatment on a similar mapping interface. And this function allows users to draw polygons around treatment areas and include all sorts of details related to that treatment. So I touched on the importance of engaging stakeholders in the project prioritization process, and I wanted to share a model that Huron Pines uses to help vet our projects, recommend solutions to major challenges, weigh in on project selection and project design, and provide evaluations of completed projects. And we call this group our Resource Advisors Committee. It meets quarterly and is composed of state and federal resource agency representatives, as well as Huron Pines board and staff members. And this process allows us to take a collective look at some of our major projects with a group of resource professionals that come from a diverse set of backgrounds. In addition to the Resource Advisors Group, Huron Pines facilitates Watershed Technical Committee meetings for several of our watershed scale restoration efforts. And these meetings generally include resource professionals, local community leaders, and members of the public. We also meet with specific project partners and landowners early and often to ensure that everyone's on the same page, thereby avoiding unnecessary conflict down the road. And finally, there are many and often unpredictable benefits of engaging non-traditional partners in conservation efforts. For example, engaging local K-12 students in pre- and post-project monitoring activities adds value to a project while providing place-based education opportunities for students. Engaging business owners, landowners, and recreation groups in watershed planning meetings has also added a lot of value to our conservation efforts. And to sum it up one more time, here's a graphic that shows our prioritization process for restoration work. The first step is to identify meaningful goals and objectives, and that's done in collaboration with stakeholders. Then complete a comprehensive inventory of all the potential sites in your area of interest that provide you with a searchable, rankable database of project sites. The next step is to analyze the entire data set to identify those sites that are considered significant resource issues. You can then further refine that list by evaluating the ecological and spatial context of each potential priority site. At this stage, you have yourselves a megalist of priority projects that you can share with partners and stakeholders. Stakeholder input will help you identify shared priorities, which together with the objective data can help you go a long way in securing letters of support and project funding. And with funding in place, you can complete designs and permits. Then it's time to implement your project and complete pre- and post-project monitoring whenever funding allows. And after you evaluate the project, make sure to take notes of lessons learned and archive that information about your completed project, which will help inform future work. And that's all I have prepared for you today. I'll leave you with my contact information, so feel free to contact me later if you have any questions or want additional information about anything that I covered today. And with that, I will take any questions that you have now.
All right, great. Thanks, Josh. That was very informative.
Thank you.
Why don't we open it up now for any questions that you may have for Josh?
Josh, this is Craig Palmer. I had a question for you. There's a lot of times when you're planning a restoration project, there's some sort of uncertainty associated with regarding what sort of response you'll get from your restoration project. And so you're sort of forced into what's called adaptive management. You have to move ahead with that uncertainty in mind. And I just wondered, how does that fit into your decision making there, and to use sort of an adaptive management model at all in your process?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like I emphasized, staying in close communication with your stakeholders, whether that's members of the public, the landowners, resource professionals, contractors. A lot of our projects, the big scale ones will bid out the engineering services, and we work closely with professionals and agency folks that are providing input at every step of the way. And yes, things always come up with big projects, and you're constantly adapting to the project as it goes. But I think to deal with that, just keeping communication lines open and having a lot of different stakeholders involved with the process every step of the way helps guide the project to completion.
Right. Okay, I have another question that kind of follows up with what Craig just asked. When you do engage stakeholders in deciding which projects need to be prioritized, do you use any kind of multi-criteria decision support tools to kind of quantify the input that you're getting from all the different stakeholders so that you can, kind of quantify the prioritization?
Yeah, I guess with our resource advisors group, for example, we have a proposal review form, and that's something that either a staff or board member at Huron Pines or a partner agency can bring to the resource advisors to sit down as a group and work through those things. And we do have a project review form that those resource advisors all fill out. So we do keep those on file and consider the input of resource professionals from a diverse background.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
This is Michael Spinar from IDEM. I was wondering, I like the way that you talked about, evaluating different criteria, like you used the example of with the dams of allowing sea lampreys in. And I guess my question is there a point in the process where you try to quantify or even qualify uncertainties in the process? Say you don't know what the interaction between species is going to be or something like that, putting basically error bars on it?
Yeah, I mean, with invasive species, like the sea lamprey, for example, a lot of times we, first barriers to the Great Lakes, if there's not a sea lamprey control program going on above that, it's often difficult to get, partner approval and permissions to remove a first barrier, and oftentimes we wouldn't necessarily want to because of that issue. And there are tools available. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has a tool that shows barriers that are considered passage issues for sea lamprey, and then also barriers that are not considered full passage barriers to lampreys. So using that tool, you can kind of look at would there be negative impacts to lampreys. As far as other invasive species, one thing that we work on is with our contractors is in our contracts we have a clause that says that they'll clean their equipment before moving equipment between sites to help avoid both terrestrial and aquatic invasive species from spreading. But to get back to your question, I guess it's more qualitative, working with agency partners that, to get the best science that we can and making decisions. But I don't know if that fully answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I had another question. Your presentation was really rich in GIS maps and geospatial representation of the data. A GIS map is based on an attribute table. So could I assume that Excel spreadsheet that the Megalist is made up from is actually the attribute table that's linked to all those GIS coverages that you showed?
It can be linked. Like the road stream crossing, definitely the latitude, longitude points for road stream crossing data gets linked into there, and that allows us to calculate upstream miles that would be reconnected.
Okay. So are you using a national hydrography data set to plop your project location down on a blue line on the map so that you can figure out what's upstream from it?
Yes, the state of Michigan website has GIS files for the hydrography, so we're using the state GIS hydrography lines and basing the calculations on those.
All right, great. All right. Anything else for Josh?
I had a question. Are there other nonprofit groups like Huron Pines that are cooperative across a regional area in the Great Lakes that are doing what you're doing?
I don't know about the entire Great Lakes region, but we certainly in northern Michigan, Huron Pines, our service area is northeast lower peninsula of Michigan. We kind of have a sister organization in the northwest that does a lot of similar work, Conservation Resource Alliance, and we have there's a few other nonprofit groups that we work with, and we work very closely with all of the federal and state resource agencies.
Do you think this is a model that should be followed in other areas around the Great Lakes, then, to have sort of a focused regional group?
Yeah, I mean, I think getting together and having a sound plan for prioritization is a good thing. And the Great Lakes road stream crossing inventory, for road stream crossings at least, that protocol was developed by a bunch of different partners, and it is meant to be applicable across the Great Lakes region. So having a standardized data set of those would be very helpful.
Yes, yeah. Thanks.
You also mentioned towards the end of your presentation there that pre- and post-monitoring can take place when funding allows. I always thought that's an interesting way to put it. How often do you come up short in not being able to fund any kind of monitoring after you put the project in?
It depends on the funding source. One of our major funders for a lot of our road stream crossing work has been National Fish and Wildlife Foundation Sustain Our Great Lakes program, and they do provide money for evaluation. So we, at a minimum, do one representative project site, for each of our major grants, and do the full longitudinal profile, cross sections, pebble count, and sometimes macroinvertebrate monitoring, both before and after a road stream crossing.
Okay.
But a big challenge with the monitoring is often, or almost always, the monitoring is, the funding for monitoring is associated with a grant, and grant periods are usually, 2 to 3 years max. So you can do a post-evaluation 1 year after a crossing or 1 year before, but really getting, that 5-year, 10-year evaluation going back to older sites, that's a challenge to get funding and worth the time and to do that.
Yeah, you got that right. All right, great. All right, anything else for Josh? All right, well, hearing none, why don't we maybe close out with talking about what's coming up next month on the webinar series. We have scheduled for October 27th a gentleman named Frank Veraldi. He's with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers out of the Chicago district. And he's been very busy lately doing a lot of field work. He does some restoration work up around the Great Lakes, the Chicago district area, and he has not been able to give me an exact title of what he's going to be talking about yet for the October 27th date, but it will be something to do with what type of restoration projects the Army Corps is doing up around the Great Lakes, and probably funded by GLRI. So I think that would be a really good opportunity to hear how the Army Corps comes at it in terms of project planning, project monitoring, and maybe talk a little bit about quality assurance and quality control from the monitoring aspect. So with that, is there anything else, Adam or Craig, that we need to mention?
Adam, yeah, we have some upcoming events that our committee is participating in. In a couple of weeks, we're putting on, contributing to a day-long training on long-term monitoring and quality assurance aspects about collecting reliable data sets. And at the Wildlife Society, it's on Saturday, the 15th, if any of you are planning to go to the Wildlife Society meeting in Raleigh. The following week, we'll be involved in the quality assurance meeting. It's kind of like it's EPA Region 6, but it is kind of like the national EPA QA meeting that's held each year, and it'll be in Dallas. And we have a session on Tuesday, the 18th. And Tim is helping us. We'll be giving a presentation there with some of his staff, and Lou Bloom as well. And so it should be an interesting session. And then we'll be doing a day-long training that we've done in the past. We're updating it a bit. It'll be at the Restore America's Estuaries Conference. It's an invited training, and it'll be on December 15th. So we got quite a few things in the mail that the committee is contributing to. That's all, Tim.
Great. All right. Anything else, Adam?
That covers it.
All right, great. I thank you all for tuning in. And if we don't talk to you the next time, we hope you have a wonderful fall, and catch up with you all later. All right. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.